On July 14, 2012, David and Emily Whitaker left their Jackson, Mississippi home in a silver 2008 Chevrolet Malibu, their two daughters sleeping safely inside. 20 minutes later, a gas station camera showed their last images at 11:30 p.m. No accident appeared. No wreckage surfaced. No clue pointed to where they went. Investigators scoured the Ross Barnett Reservoir for weeks, returning with nothing. Theories quickly grew. Maybe David and Emily had left to start fresh. Maybe debts tied to an unknown man pushed them to flee. Their daughters grew up facing loss, haunted always by the mystery of what happened. Then in 2022, everything changed. A volunteer dive group rescanned the reservoir with advanced sonar. Under heavy mud, they found a silver sedan untouched for 10 years. Its doors sealed, seatbelts locked, but a bloodstain stood out on the panel. It didn't belong to either parent. Someone else had been there. Someone who knew how to arrange a scene like an accident. Someone who could wait 10 years believing the crime buried for good. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on every case. Jackson, Mississippi. The night of July 14th, 2012, a heavy southern summer heat clung to the air. Humidity lifted like steam from the ground. Strong winds carried the smell of approaching rain. Leaves rustled across quiet streets. In one small suburban home, a hall light glowed across tiled floor. David and Emily Whitaker stepped out, gently closing the door, leaving their daughters asleep in their rooms. The hum of the air conditioner filled the house. The faint scent of baby formula lingered. Everything looked normal, except the parents were gone. Outside, a silver 2008 Chevrolet Malibu sat in the driveway, its paint reflecting the street lamp's glow. At 11:15 p.m., the engine started. Headlights carved through the darkness as the car pulled away, moving onto I-55 where scattered traffic ran north. The highway was quiet, tires pressing the hot asphalt, thunder sounding from far away. On a lonely stretch, a truck driver later recalled seeing a Malibu stopped, hood raised as if broken down. A faint yellow glow shone from inside. He saw shadows of two people moving. Then the moment passed as his truck continued into the night. Not far away, at a small roadside station, cameras caught David and Emily one last time. The footage was brief, under 2 minutes. David stood at the counter holding a can of coffee, his face showing exhaustion. Emily stood beside him, tapping her phone, looking toward the door with nervous glances as it closed behind them. That was their last image. After 11:47 p.m., both phones dropped from the network. Their GPS records ended at the western shore of the reservoir. No more signals followed. It was as though the night and coming storm swallowed the car whole, leaving silence across Jackson. Morning turned silence into alarm. The daughters woke, searching for their parents. The kitchen stood quiet. No coffee cups clinking. No familiar footsteps. Their grandmother, living close by, arrived and sensed immediately something was wrong. The bed was still made, blankets undisturbed. The garage was empty, the Malibu gone. Trembling, she dialed David, then Emily. Only cold, automated responses returned. Fear struck her, and she called local police. By 8 a.m., the call reached the Hinds County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Randall Hayes, a 20-year veteran, understood the urgency. The first hours of a missing persons case are golden. Hayes launched resources quickly. One team patrolled I-55, stopping at truck stops and side roads. A water unit used rubber boats to sweep the reservoir, focusing where phone signals ended. Another team canvassed neighbors, friends, colleagues. Meanwhile, the Whitaker family sat waiting, calls to hospitals, morgues, and stations returning nothing. At noon, the tech unit produced a key lead, security footage from a gas station along I-55. There stood David in a light shirt, holding coffee, walking tired but calm. Emily stood next to him, eyes locked on her phone, glancing at the glass door with worry. No strangers appeared in frame. No conflict showed. As the automatic door closed, headlights lit the night. The Malibu drove off. That was the last time David and Emily appeared. Police reviewed dozens of other cameras along I-55, from toll points to storefronts, but the Malibu appeared nowhere. It had vanished after leaving the gas station. By the end of the first day, the search was stretched to its limit. Police helicopters circled steadily above the reservoir. K-9 units sniffed through David and Emily's clothing and personal belongings. Divers entered the cold, murky water along the shoreline and searched the deeper pockets believed most likely to hide a vehicle. Every effort came back the same, empty. There were no skid marks, no shattered glass, no signs of panic or struggle. No oil sheen on the surface, no tire tracks along the bank. Just a wide, quiet lake mirroring the unsettled sky, reflecting clouds that hinted at a storm. It was as if the water had erased every answer. By sunset, Sheriff Randall Hayes held a short press conference. His voice was steady but heavy. "We cannot yet determine what happened to the Whitakers," he said. He laid out 3 theories for the public. First, that David and Emily may have left on their own, though he admitted that seemed unlikely, especially with 2 young children left behind. Second, that they might have crashed either into the reservoir or along a remote stretch of road. But again, no physical evidence supported this. And third, the most troubling option, a possible crime. That someone had intentionally made them disappear. None of the possibilities felt definitive. All remained open. Within hours, the speculation began. Whispers filled the grocery aisles, barber shops, church lobbies. Some believed the couple had financial trouble. Others insisted it had to be foul play, a kidnapping maybe. But while Jackson exchanged rumors, the Whitaker family faced the hardest part. They held the girls close, trying to answer a question that had no comfort in it. Where are Mom and Dad? As night settled over the city for the second time since the disappearance, the mystery took root. The story of David and Emily wasn't just a missing persons report anymore. It had become something bigger, something that would haunt Mississippi for years. The next morning, search efforts continued with no results. In response, the investigation shifted toward the people who knew the couple best. Sheriff Hayes formed a task team of younger officers and state police to canvass the neighborhood door to door. They moved quickly through the Whitakers' street. One by one, neighbors offered the same impressions. David and Emily were warm, kind, always saying hello. No tension, no drama. They loved their kids. "They volunteered at church. No way they'd just walk away from those girls," said one neighbor, her eyes rimmed red. Her words had weight. The theory that they left on their own began to fall apart. Investigators turned to the couple's workplaces. David worked for a small construction firm downtown. Co-workers called him precise and hard-working, though he kept mostly to himself. Emily worked part-time as a school cashier. She was known for her kindness and calm presence. Neither job was flashy, but both were steady. Financial records confirmed this. They had no major debts beyond a modest mortgage that was nearly paid off. David had recently been promised a higher-paying project. Emily's best friend said she'd just booked a family vacation to Biloxi. They had every reason to stay. While interviews were underway, tech teams dug into phone and GPS records. David's phone moved north along I-55 around 11:20 p.m. Emily's device stopped at 11:47 p.m., near the western edge of the Ross Barnett Reservoir. After that, both phones went silent. Investigators noted that 17-minute gap is critical, from the gas station stop to the point where both phones vanished. That narrow stretch of time became the core focus. Another team reviewed their financial activity. There were no charges, no withdrawals, no sign of preparation. Salaries from that month remained untouched. When people flee, they prepare. These accounts had gone cold. It was like their story had just stopped. The family was asked to come to the station again. The grandmother repeated what she knew in a quiet but firm voice. David adored his daughters. Emily never left them for more than a few hours. "If you think they left on their own," she said, voice breaking, "I swear to God that's impossible." Investigators documented the interview thoroughly. Family strongly rejects abandonment theory. In the first 48 hours, police interviewed more than 30 people, family, friends, co-workers, church members. Not one of them suggested that David or Emily had a reason to run. There were no signs of tension, arguments, or threats. What they described instead was a couple who loved their family and had plans they never got to keep. By the afternoon of July 16th, Sheriff Hayes sat in a small briefing room staring down at a large table map. Red pins marked every area searched: roads, woods, boat ramps, coves. Still nothing. He tapped the map, frustration in his fingers. "We need to figure out what happened in those 17 minutes, he said to the room. That's the key. The investigation, instead of narrowing down, kept expanding. The Malibu was gone. 2 people had vanished with it. No messages, no money trail, no ping from any tower. Just one green GPS dot. Just silence. The complete absence of movement, sound, or evidence made it clear. This wasn't an ordinary missing persons case. Something more deliberate had taken place. Something dark. Hayes stared down at the map again. The theories weren't working. It was time for action. By morning on July 17, 2012, they launched a full-scale recovery effort. Helicopters returned to the skies over Ross Barnett. Infrared cameras scanned thousands of acres of dark water, looking for metallic reflections beneath the surface. On the ground, water patrol teams moved out in rubber boats and canoes, dividing the lake into sections, dropping floating markers, and using aging sonar equipment to sweep the muddy bottom. Divers from Jackson arrived with oxygen tanks and high-intensity lights, diving into flagged locations. Every dive took hours. Every dive came back empty. Tree limbs, concrete rubble from past construction, old boats half buried, even animal remains long decomposed in the silt, but nothing that resembled a silver Malibu. No evidence of David or Emily Whitaker. No breakthrough. The operation expanded. Dirt roads circling the lake were examined for brake marks or tire impressions, but the storm that struck the night the couple vanished had erased any such evidence. When police spoke to local fishermen who were out that evening, all they remembered was thunder and heavy winds. No one heard an engine. No one saw a car enter the water. Each lead felt like grasping in the dark. Search teams kept pushing forward, barely pausing across 3 consecutive days. The local news covered every moment. Helicopters circling overhead were broadcast live. Police lining the shore were shown between on-air interviews with nervous residents. The question echoed, how does a car and 2 people just disappear? One report on WLBT ended with that line, and it stuck. The Whitaker family waited along the shoreline, watching in silence each time a diver emerged. Over and over, heads shook empty, no findings. By the end of the week, hope began to fade. Sheriff Hayes kept his resolve on television, but privately, the weight was mounting. He worried how long public attention would last. He feared the case might slip away, and within 2 weeks, it began to. Other headlines replaced David and Emily. A warehouse fire. A contentious election. The Whitakers' faces remained only on missing posters taped to utility poles and church walls. But the urgency disappeared. Inside the case file, the number of reports began to slow. The early momentum, pages of notes, interview transcripts, GPS logs, had all been reviewed. There were no bodies, no vehicle, no physical scene to work from. Sheriff Hayes underlined the summary on his caseboard. No car. No crime scene. No evidence. His team continued working, but many knew the case was cooling fast. By the time the 2nd month passed, the large-scale search was scaled back. Helicopters stopped their daily flights. The older sonar was stored away. Divers were called only when new sightings were phoned in by residents, and even those grew rare. The department publicly promised to keep looking, but privately, budget constraints made that impossible. The Whitaker file was stamped with a pending notice. It would remain open, but it would no longer be active. For the family, the pain only deepened. Each night, the 2 daughters asked the same question. When are Mom and Dad coming home? Their grandmother held them close, giving no answer, because there was none to give. In Jackson, people got used to the quiet. The case came up in conversation sometimes, only to fall away again like the reservoirs still surface, untouched, undisturbed, and so the Whitaker case stalled. No closure, no clarity, just a long pause in the city's memory. In 2013, after a year of no new information, the Hinds County Sheriff's Office made it official. The case was reclassified as cold. Hundreds of pages of documentation, search maps, dive logs, forensic notes, witness interviews were boxed and sealed. Stored in a lower-level records room beneath Jackson Police Headquarters, the Whitaker name, once on nightly news, now existed on a white label stuck to the spine of a file folder. To investigators, it was a bitter failure. Despite all their efforts, nothing had worked. No sonar ping, no dive result. To the community, it was unsettling. that two people could vanish so completely just outside the city limits and never be found. The Whitaker family refused to let go. Every year on July 14th, relatives and friends gathered at the church where David and Emily once prayed. They lit candles, displayed a wedding photo near the altar, and sat quietly as the girls, now older, rested in their grandmother's lap. They prayed, not just for closure, but for a sign, something, anything. The ritual became a yearly rhythm, a way to remember, a way to keep the story from fading, a signal that someone still cared. Anna and Grace, the daughters, grew up under the shadow of absence. Anna was 8. Grace had just turned 6. They missed what other kids had. School drop-offs, Saturday chores, backyard laughter with their father, story time with their mother at night. Where are Mom and Dad? It became a question they never stopped carrying. In school, Anna avoided assignments about family memories. Grace quietly tucked away Mother's Day crafts instead of turning them in. They lived with an invisible wound, a gap, a silence, and Jackson didn't forget either. People still talked, at farmers' markets, in line at the pharmacy, during slow moments at church. Some believed the couple drove into the reservoir and were still there, lost in the deep mud. Others said it had to be foul play. 2 phones going silent at the exact same time didn't sit right. And a few, though, fewer people over time insisted the couple had run away, escaping something. But most felt sympathy, pity, and viewed the disappearance as a shared wound the city never truly healed. The media moved on to newer events, but every time another person went missing in Mississippi, reporters referenced the Whitaker case as an unsolved benchmark. Crime shows occasionally reran segments, pairing sweeping helicopter shots over the reservoir with David's kind smile and Emily's warm, familiar expression. Each time one aired, it pulled the Whitaker family back into pain that had never fully gone away. As teenagers, Anna and Grace endured whispers, awkward glances, and curious stares from classmates who had seen the coverage. The case file was reopened now and then over the years, usually triggered by a new report of debris underwater or a possible car sighting. Each time ended the same, a rotted-out boat or submerged junk. Sometimes new detectives reviewed the file for training, trying to understand the layers of a complex disappearance. Most ended their review quietly, closing the folder and moving on. The Whitaker name slowly became a cautionary tale, a symbol of frustration. Pastors mentioned the family in Sunday prayers. In classrooms, teachers used the case to teach students about community action, recalling the early days when hundreds of residents joined search efforts. For many in Jackson, the Whitakers proved that even in a small, seemingly calm city, a mystery could take root and never let go. In late 2021, 9 years after David and Emily vanished, the church held a larger memorial than usual. Hundreds of Jackson residents came together that night, holding candles and flowers, forming a silent circle around the church entrance. Anna, now a college freshman, stepped up to the podium. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "We will never give up. My parents deserve answers, and we will keep searching." Her words echoed across the churchyard like a spark reigniting a cold flame. Just as the case felt buried in the dust of forgotten time, something shifted. An unexpected moment in 2022 cracked the silence wide open and gave the Whitaker file a new chapter. But for nearly a full decade before, it had remained what it was. A cold case. A void, a quiet ache in Jackson's heart. After the 2021 memorial, residents left the church quietly, candles flickering in the breeze. But Anna's vow, "We will never give up," lingered, in minds like an unshakable command. Then in February 2022, nearly 10 years since that stormy night, a message came through, a civilian diving group called the Delta Recovery Unit reached out to both the Whitaker family and the Hinds County Sheriff's Office, DRU. Was a non-profit made up of retired military divers, sonar specialists, and volunteers. Their mission was to locate missing people and vehicles in the murky waters of the southern United States. They had already helped close cold cases in Alabama and Louisiana, using time, technology, and sheer patience. Now, they were offering to bring their expertise to Mississippi. Travis Miller, DRU's founder, was a weathered Navy veteran with salt and pepper hair and a low, serious tone. He often repeated the same line: "Every number must be precise, because underwater, only the truth remains." With him was Cole Johnson, a younger sonar technician who'd once worked offshore in the oil industry, guiding scan vessels across the Gulf. His eyes rarely left the sonar screen, always reading it like a language no one else understood. Together with their team, they arrived in a teal pickup truck towing a small aluminum boat. Inside were two of the best sonar systems available, the Humminbird Helix 12 and Garmin LiveScope. At their first briefing with law enforcement, Travis and Cole laid a large laminated map of Ross Barnett Reservoir across the table. On the other side sat Sheriff Randall Hayes. He was older now, edging toward retirement, but still deeply familiar with every twist and corner of the lake. Travis pointed to the western edge. "We believe the car is still here," he said firmly. Cole nodded. Back then, the sonar tech used in the 2012 search wasn't nearly as clear. With what we're running now, we'll see tire treads beneath mud. If that Malibu's down there, it won't stay hidden. Sheriff Hayes went quiet for a long while. In the last 10 years, so many teams had come through. So many promises. So many fruitless dives. But something about the quiet confidence in these two men, something in the way they looked at the map, sparked a small, cautious hope. "If you think you can help," Hayes said slowly, "I'll reopen the file and issue the search permits." With that, the case was active again. Word spread fast. Local news stations ran the headline: "Civilian dive team to reinvestigate 2012 Whittaker case." Crowds gathered as the DRU boat launched from the reservoir's edge. Cameras zoomed in on shiny sonar screens glowing in the morning sun. Cole stood before them, holding a printed scan of a car they had once located in an Alabama lake. "If we found it there," he said, "we can find it here." Travis stepped forward. His voice was calm and deliberate. 10 years is too long, but it's never too late. What matters is, we don't stop. The words struck a chord. The Whittaker family, seated in the front row, quietly wiped away tears. It was the first time in years someone had promised, out loud, to go looking again. DRU's plan was meticulous. For 3 weeks, they would scan the entire reservoir, dividing it into 50-meter-wide lanes. The boat would move at 2 miles per hour, allowing for crystal-clear sonar imaging. Each section was marked off on the map. Whenever the equipment picked up an anomaly, they'd drop a buoy and lower a powerful magnet to check for metal. If metal was confirmed, divers would descend. Every step would be filmed. Every finding would be reported back to law enforcement. Transparency was key. Sheriff Hayes appeared beside the dive team for a press conference. It was his first public appearance tied to the case in years. Facing the cameras, he said, "We owe the Whittaker family an answer, and we will find it." His words made the evening news. Papers that hadn't mentioned the Whittakers in years now printed front-page spreads. Jackson's most haunting cold case reopened. Public reaction was mixed. Some hoped that technology, patience, and modern equipment would finally give closure. Others were more cautious, worried it would only open a fresh round of heartbreak. Still, once more, Jackson turned its full attention to the reservoir. The waiting began again. But this time, with sonar beams sweeping deep beneath the surface. The silent water that had hidden the Whittakers for a decade now shimmered under the drone of renewed attention. As the announcement ended, DRU's flashlights swept beams across the dark surface of the reservoir. Their aluminum boat idled as they checked the motor, the water gently lapping at its hull like the whispers of the lake itself. Everyone watching understood. This was no longer a dormant file in a dusty archive. The Whittaker case had been reignited, and somewhere beneath that still water, the truth waited while DRU calibrated their sonar and charted out the lake grid. Back at the Hinds County Sheriff's Office, a young investigator named Rachel Moore took on a different task, reviewing the original case file. New to the force but already known for her precision and dislike of vague conclusions, Rachel spent several days buried in the records room. She laid out the thick manila folders across a long metal table. underlining and annotating statements, timelines, and maps with red ink. Somewhere inside those old details, she believed, was something missed, and she was right. In the original 2012 documentation, the last confirmed sighting placed David and Emily on gas station surveillance footage at 11:30 p.m. Around that time, cell tower records showed both of their phones moving along I-55. Emily's phone then abruptly stopped pinging at 11:47 p.m. near the western edge of the reservoir. Rachel paused, frowning at the time, a 17-minute window. On paper, it seemed fine, about what you'd expect driving from the station to the reservoir. But something didn't sit right. She checked the route distance again. The trip should have taken 10 to 12 minutes, not 17. That's not just traffic, she murmured. They were missing somewhere in a 30-minute hole. She ran the numbers again, mapping the minutes to potential turns and detours. Had they stopped voluntarily? Were they forced off the road? Did they take an old path no longer in use? Rachel pulled a topographic map from 2012 and compared it with a recent one. Several small roads near the western shore had been abandoned after flood damage in 2015. If the Malibu turned down one of those before reaching the water, it might explain both the delay and the phone's final signal. She circled each forgotten path, focusing especially on those leading directly to the area where the last ping occurred. It gave her pause. That area matched an old witness report, a truck driver who said he saw a silver car on the shoulder, hood raised, before vanishing down the road. The deeper Rachel looked, the more gaps emerged. Many witness interviews had been short, barely recorded. Some statements were never reconciled with others. And crucially, the sonar scans in 2012 had focused on deep water around the dam, not the narrower, tree-covered inlets where a vehicle could hide. If the car slipped into a wooded inlet, she wrote in her notebook, they never had a chance to see it back then. She began compiling a visual timeline. David and Emily leaving home, appearing at the gas station, entering I-55 and then vanishing. She connected those data points on the map with red lines. Between the last known sighting and the last signal, a large empty zone stared back. It spanned a corner of the western reservoir no one had fully scanned. She highlighted the zone in red. That was where DRU needed to search first. At a coordination meeting with DRU and Sheriff Hayes, Rachel stood before a projected map. There's a 30-minute window, she said evenly, pointing to the red zone. This is where the signal stopped. This is where the Malibu almost certainly is. Travis Miller leaned forward. His expression turned focused. Then that's where we begin. We'll grid the zone and cover it thoroughly, Cole Johnson nodded. Our live scope will pick up detail down to wheel rims. Any metal object, we'll see it. For a moment, the room fell silent. Sheriff Hayes stared at the map. He'd seen search teams come and go. He'd seen hope rise and fade. But this, Rachel's analysis, the clean grid, the confidence from DRU, it felt different. Good, he said quietly. Let's start where we never had certainty, where the signal stopped. If the truth's at the bottom of that lake, it's time to pull it up. As the meeting ended, Rachel stayed behind. She stood staring at the red zone, eyes fixed. That part of the map felt like an old wound that had festered in the dark. If they missed again, the cost could be years more. But for the first time, Rachel felt something shift. That 30-minute gap, it wasn't just a void. It was a doorway. The next morning, a soft mist draped across the reservoir. The DRU boat was back at the western shore. The aluminum hull eased into the water, engine humming faintly. Travis stood at the bow, eyes on the wide, quiet lake. Cole adjusted the side-scan sonar, locking the screen into place and checking the battery levels. Rachel stood on the dock, gripping her notebook and folded map. Her heart pounded with the weight of possibility. The boat glided out slowly, about 2 miles per hour, slow enough to catch clear sonar reads. On the monitor, the lake bottom revealed itself in layers of light and shadow. Cole pointed. This is bedrock. That's an old log. But if there's anything metal, it'll show up instantly. Rachel leaned in, watching the ghost-like images scroll by. It looked like static to her, but to Cole, it spoke. Learning to read sonar was like decoding a language, and Rachel was learning fast. About an hour into the search, as the boat drifted near a narrow inlet along the western shoreline, Cole frowned. On the sonar screen, an irregular shape emerged, roughly 15 feet in length, tilted slightly beneath the muddy bottom. Straight edges, faintly rounded corners. "Travis, look at this," Cole said, his voice low but charged. Travis stepped beside him, eyes fixed on the monitor. He didn't speak for a long moment, then gave a subtle nod. "This isn't rock. That's man-made. And it's the exact size of a sedan." The boat went quiet. Rachel's grip tightened on her notebook, her breath caught in her chest. The image on the screen showed it too clearly. A 15-foot long, 6-foot wide shape with a gently curved roof, half buried beneath a layer of thick mud. It had clearly been there for years. Cole slowly rotated the controls, circling the location to get multiple angles. With each pass, the image sharpened. 4 shadowed wheels emerged beneath the sediment. The outline of a frame, the kind built to carry people, grew more obvious. "That's it," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "That's the Malibu," but Travis raised a hand. "Not yet," he said. "We don't call it until it's verified. We need the police here. We need it official and admissible." Cole logged the GPS coordinates, double-checking the readings, noting every detail down to water depth and surrounding features. Then he released an orange buoy into the water. It bobbed gently above the mystery object. The engine cut off, and the boat rocked quietly on soft ripples. They all stared at the buoy as if it marked the grave of a truth buried for a decade. Around noon, Sheriff Hayes received the call. Travis's voice came through scratchy but steady. "We've found something, very likely a vehicle. Location is logged. You should come now." 40 minutes later, police vehicles arrived at the reservoir. Tires screeching over gravel. Uniformed officers stepped out, carrying cameras, notebooks, and sealed evidence kits. Hayes led the team toward the buoy. He paused at the edge of the water, stared at the floating marker, and whispered to himself, Maybe this is it." On the boat, Cole replayed the sonar footage for the officers. The screen lit up with a pulsing outline, frame, tires, body. "That's a car," someone muttered. "Look, there are wheels." A younger officer asked quietly, "Couldn't it just be some junked vehicle?" "Maybe," Travis answered immediately. "But the odds of it being the exact size and in the exact location where the Whitakers' last signal came from?" "Slim to none," Sheriff Hayes nodded. "Seal the area. Tape the shoreline. Nobody but authorized personnel from here on out." Yellow tape went up fast. Officers pushed back curious onlookers. A mobile crane was dispatched. Divers suited up. Rachel stood nearby, her nerves buzzing. After almost 10 years, they had something real. No longer a theory. No longer a rumor. The DRU boat stayed anchored near the buoy while sonar scanned continuously to keep the object on screen. The image showed the vehicle still, like it had fallen asleep in the mud. Travis triple-checked the anchor lines. "We can't mess this up," he said. "If this really is the Malibu, we treat it like a sealed crime scene." Hayes gazed across the water, hands clasped tightly. Years of waiting. Years of press conferences with no news. Years of grief for a family with no closure. And now, maybe an answer. He raised his voice. "Start the recovery. Record everything. Let's find the truth." The Ross Barnett Reservoir, still for so long, turned suddenly electric. From that orange buoy, small waves rippled outward, echoes of something lost returning to the surface. At high noon, with cameras set and the area sealed, Travis and Cole pulled on their dive suits. Oxygen tanks clicked into place. Rubber masks adjusted over determined faces. The sound of gear clinking and waves lapping filled the air with tension. Before going in, Travis reached for Hayes' hand and gripped it firmly. "If this is the car, Sheriff, today changes everything." Hayes nodded once. His eyes were wet. Without another word, Travis slid into the murky water. It closed over him silently. Cole followed, tethered to the boat by a safety line. Within a few meters, daylight disappeared. The reservoir was thick with algae and sediment. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Inside their masks, the divers saw only a brown haze. Weak flashlight beams pushed forward through the mud, flickering off invisible shapes. They followed the rope, one hand at a time. Every movement was slow. Every inch forward felt like swimming through darkness with no end. Cole's heart pounded. His breath through the regulator sounded like a war drum in his ears. Then, Travis's gloved hand brushed against something solid. He stopped. Signaled Cole. They traced the surface. Smooth, curved, submerged, but unmistakably metal. We found it, Travis thought. His hand swept away mud, revealing an oval emblem beneath layers of algae. The flashlight glinted off faint letters, Chevrolet. They looked at each other through their fogged masks. Cole gave a sharp thumbs up, but they kept working. Travis reached lower, brushing along the rear bumper. After minutes of scraping, he found raised characters. License plate. He cleared away mud with his fingers. WS4HT92. The sequence matched the one in the 2012 report, the silver Chevrolet. Malibu, David and Emily's car. Cole grabbed the underwater camera and filmed the emblem. The plate, everything. That footage would soon become the breakthrough. Travis marked the side of the car with yellow tape for surface visibility, then clipped a steel cable to the frame. Their movements were cautious, deliberate, more like handling a casket than a car. Above, the crowd watched the bubbles rise. The safety rope tightened, and the secret that had slept beneath Jackson for a decade was about to be pulled back into the light. When Travis tugged the rope 3 times, the success signal, Sheriff Hayes nearly broke down. He whispered, "We've found them." Rachel, standing nearby, hands trembling over her mouth, couldn't hold back tears. Underwater, Travis and Cole remained for several extra minutes, carefully examining the site. The car was tilted at a steep angle, doors sealed shut, half buried in thick mud. Long strands of algae draped over the hood, like the lake itself had been trying to keep a secret. Their flashlights cut through the murky water, illuminating the faint shapes of the front seats inside. Travis felt his throat tighten. He knew what lay beyond that glass. The fate of David and Emily had waited silently beneath this water for nearly a decade. After more than 20 minutes submerged, the divers surfaced, tearing off their masks, lungs heaving. From the shore, cheers erupted from the crowd. Locals who had waited years clapped and wept, overwhelmed. Cole spoke first, breath still shaky. "It's the one. 2008 in Malibu." "Plate matches," Travis added. "No question." "We found the Whitaker's car." Sheriff Hayes walked toward them, gripping their shoulders. "You've done what we couldn't in 10 years. From here on out, everything changes." He gave the signal to prepare the recovery equipment. A mobile crane rumbled to life, steel cables uncoiled, ready to raise the car from the depths. Rachel stood silently, watching the orange buoy bob in the water. In her mind, only one thought echoed. The truth is rising. That entry in the investigation log would later be marked as the turning point, the moment the cold case cracked open. The Whitaker file, once hopeless, now held something real. A vehicle, a time capsule, and inside, the answers Jackson had waited for. The crane's motor roared, shattering the reservoir's long silence. All eyes turned toward the buoy, where a thick steel cable dropped slowly into the water. On the boat, the divers carefully guided it toward the submerged frame. The metal loop was secured under the vehicle's undercarriage. A hand signal went up. Slowly, the cable pulled tight. Below, the mud churned into thick columns. The surface bubbled. Then, rising like a ghost, the silver hood of a car broke the waterline, caked in a decade's worth of mud and debris. From behind the yellow tape, the gathered crowd gasped. Some cried out. Some simply cried. After 10 years, the Whitaker family's 2008 Malibu had returned to the daylight. As it rose higher, water gushed from shattered windows. Algae and debris poured out with it, releasing a foul, earthy smell. Police moved quickly, erecting tarps around the vehicle. Forensic officers in white hazmat suits stood ready, lined up with evidence bags and labeled containers. Sheriff Hayes raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "This is now an active crime scene. No one enters but the investigation team." The car was lowered onto the lakeside platform. Specialized tools were brought in to force open the door. As the metal creaked and gave way, silence fell over the area. No one spoke. Inside the vehicle, under the dim light of flashlights and the weight of 10 years, sat 2 skeletal figures. Seatbelts still crossed their chests. Bones rested where bodies once sat, heads tilted toward the side windows, as though even in their final moments, they were watching the world pass by. On one of the bony fingers, a tarnished wedding ring still clung, dull but unmistakable. Rachel stepped back, clutching her notebook. Her vision blurred with tears. There was no doubt now. It was them, David and Emily. They hadn't run. They hadn't disappeared. They had never left that car. Forensic officers began their meticulous work, documenting every inch. One found a shattered phone beneath the passenger seat. Its battery had been dislodged. Beside it, an empty leather wallet. The dashboard bore dark stains soaked into dried mud. Ultraviolet lights revealed faint glowing traces. Blood, long-dried. Everything was catalogued, bagged, and tagged. Every action recorded from multiple cameras. Sheriff Hayes watched from outside the tarp line, face rigid. 10 years of unanswered questions reduced to this scene. Skeletal remains, cracked windows, a silent car. No miracle endings, just truth. He turned toward the Whitaker family, standing under police escort, yards away. The grandmother held her granddaughters close, all three crying, bodies shaking. Hayes didn't speak to them, not yet. Words wouldn't help. Only justice would. The Malibu, once fully secured, dripped onto the dirt. It was hauled onto a flatbed, tarped and sealed. The vehicle was to be stored at the Jackson Evidence Facility. A police convoy formed. Sirens wailed as they pulled away, echoing through the trees, announcing to the town that something long buried had finally come to light. Before the car left, Travis walked to Rachel. "We did it," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning," Rachel nodded. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. Police left a detail behind to continue the search. Divers swept the area around the discovery site, looking for additional clues. They recovered fragments, broken metal, scattered parts, possibly from the car's impact, possibly from something more. No one said it out loud, but everyone shared the same thought. David and Emily didn't drive into the water by accident. Someone put them there. That evening, the news broke across Mississippi. Whitaker family car recovered after 10 years. Helicopter footage showed the mud-covered vehicle emerging from the lake. Jackson watched in shock. Phone lines flooded. Residents called in, eager to help, hoping for more truth, or fearing what might come next. For the investigators, the mission was now crystal clear. This was a homicide scene. The skeletal remains left no room for speculation. That night, back at the sheriff's office, Hayes sat alone in his chair, the Whitaker file open in front of him. The folder still bore its old label, Cold Case. With a heavy hand, he took out a red marker, crossed it out, and in bold letters wrote 3 words, Homicide Case. Outside, wind moved across the reservoir like a whisper. The lake had kept its silence for 10 long years, but not anymore. The truth had surfaced, and a new chapter was beginning. Jackson would no longer pretend this was a mystery without a cause. It had always been a crime, just hidden well. The mud-caked Malibu was transported to Jackson's secure evidence storage the same night. The skeletal remains of David and Emily Whitaker were sent immediately to the Mississippi State Forensic Lab for full examination. At dawn, the lab's sterile cold room glowed under fluorescent lights. Steel tables gleamed. Instruments were laid out in perfect order. At the center stood Chief Forensic Pathologist Dr. Linda Harper. With over 2 decades of experience, she understood what this case meant to the town. Her job wasn't just to confirm identity, it was to set the direction for an entire murder investigation. The 2 skeletons were placed side by side. Despite being submerged for a decade, much of the bone structure had remained intact. There were still clues to be found. Beside the driver's body lay a corroded wristwatch, barely legible but still engraved. David W. On the passenger's finger, a dulled gold wedding ring clung to bone. These artifacts alone gave the family and officers near certainty about the victims' identities. Still, official confirmation was needed. DNA samples were taken from both skeletons. Bone marrow was extracted and compared against the daughters' profiles. The results were clear. The remains belonged to David and Emily Whitaker. With identities confirmed, Dr. Harper and her team began a full forensic assessment. David's skull showed a long, sharp fracture running from temple to the back of the head, a clear impact from a heavy, blunt object. Emily's injuries were eerily similar. Her forehead had caved inward, spiderweb cracks rippling from the center. These were not injuries caused by drowning. The angles and severity of the fractures pointed to trauma inflicted before death. The chest regions told the same story. David had 4 broken ribs on his right side. Emily had 3 on each side. None were consistent with crash damage or water pressure. These were violent impacts, like blunt force kicks or punches. Some bones still showed faint traces of hemorrhaging, meaning the injuries occurred while they were still alive. The final forensic report listed the cause of death as traumatic brain injury and blunt force trauma. Back at the lab, fabric remnants, dried mud, and traces of possible blood were removed from the Malibu's interior. Under ultraviolet lights, faint glowing spots confirmed old bloodstains on the dashboard. Every item, every smear, every particle was bagged and logged. Chest-mounted and handheld cameras documented everything. When Dr. Harper finalized the report, she didn't leave room for doubt. "This was not a traffic accident," she said flatly. "This was a staged double murder." The report landed on Sheriff Hayes's desk within hours. He read every page in silence. Every year he'd spent wondering what went wrong now had a new weight. This wasn't a failure of search. It was the aftermath of a carefully planned crime. He called an emergency meeting. Laying the thick report on the table, he looked at his team and said, "As of this moment, the Whitaker case is a double homicide." Nothing less. News traveled fast. By afternoon, every major channel ran the headline, "Whitaker deaths ruled homicide." Jackson's unease turned to public fury. For a decade, everyone had assumed the couple vanished in a tragic accident. Now they knew it had been murder, and the killer had lived among them this whole time. Candlelight vigils were held, but prayers were laced with suspicion. Whispers spread. Who did this? Who knew? The Whitaker daughters, Anna and Grace, now in their 20s, were notified privately. The police told them gently. Both cried. For years they'd held on to the hope that their parents died quickly, without pain. But now they knew better. "They were hurt before they drowned," Anna whispered, clinging to her sister. "At least now we know." But the truth was bitter. For investigators, everything changed. The entire timeline of July 14, 2012 had to be rebuilt. Not as a missing persons case, but a murder plot. Rachel Moore, who first noticed the 30-minute time gap, now saw it clearly. Someone used that gap to kill 2 people and stage their disappearance. The reservoir wasn't random, it was chosen. The killer knew where to hide them. In the Jackson Evidence Warehouse, the Malibu sat under constant surveillance in a sealed, temperature-controlled room. Cameras covered every angle. White tops lay on the ground. Crime scene technicians in full suits began methodically dismantling the car's interior. That's when the next breakthrough happened. In the back seat, beneath a thick layer of sludge, they found it. A cracked Nokia phone. Its battery separated, but the SIM card still intact, and it still held secrets. Rachel spotted it right away. Even an old SIM card could hold messages, numbers, possibly answers a decade of searching had failed to uncover. She sealed the Nokia phone in an evidence bag with careful hands. This small, forgotten object might break open everything. Near the gas pedal, the forensic team discovered a men's leather wallet. The leather was nearly dissolved, its contents long decayed. No cash. Just a few scraps of rotted paper and a corroded bank card fragment. According to the Whitaker family, David never left home without a few $100s in emergency cash. Its emptiness suggested more than just decay. Someone had stolen the contents, possibly right after the murder. An ultraviolet scan of the interior revealed another clue, a bloodstain on the driver's door. The sample was rushed to the state lab. Days later, the results came back. It wasn't David's. It wasn't Emily's. The DNA was unknown, foreign. A third person's blood had been in that car. To detectives, it was gold. An unidentified DNA profile, undeniable, unexplainable, and likely belonging to the killer. As the team processed the interior, they found more. A lone shoe print embedded in dried mud on the driver's side floor mat. It was larger than David's size, and the sole pattern didn't match any of his known shoes. The print had a distinct herringbone tread, likely from a Red Wing work boot. Size 11, the kind worn by mechanics or construction workers. Rachel examined the photograph of the tread. Her skin prickled. "This isn't David's footprint," she said aloud. "Someone else sat behind that wheel." The findings were compiled immediately into a report. In a tense team briefing, Sheriff Hayes stood in front of the evidence table and pointed to the photo. "Whoever left this boot print," he said, "was in that seat, driving that car into the reservoir." Rachel nodded grimly. "And they bled. That foreign DNA is the key." The Nokia phone was rushed to the state's digital forensics lab. Technicians used high-resolution SIM readers to scan the tiny chip. Any final message, any last contact, could become the trailhead in a fresh manhunt. Meanwhile, the team traced the shoe tread to a 2012 database. It matched Red Wing's size 11 work boot, a heavy-duty model popular with laborers. Not a smoking gun, but enough to sketch a silhouette, a tall, strong-built man. Likely local, possibly known. Late one evening, Rachel sat in the lab, staring at photos. The wallet, the blood, the boot. She flipped her notebook open and wrote, "Not an accident. Someone was in the car. Someone drove. Someone left their own blood behind." With that, the Whitaker file burst back to life. Local media dropped the word, disappearance. New headlines read, "Evidence points to murder in Whitaker case." Tip lines rang non-stop. One caller remembered a strange man near the reservoir that week. Another described a white pickup seen parked near the water. The flood of leads stretched the sheriff's office thin, but Hayes didn't mind. He welcomed the chaos. Standing over the Malibu, he muttered, 10 years. And he still left a trail. He thought this would stay buried. He was wrong. That car had carried more than David and Emily. It had carried the killer's footprints, fingerprints, and blood. There had never been just two people in that car. A third sat behind the wheel, erasing lives and trying to erase the evidence. But not all evidence fades. Now, with physical proof in hand, blood, wallet, phone, print, Hayes made the call. Re-interview every witness from 2012. What once seemed irrelevant might now be the crack that breaks the case wide open. On a whiteboard, Hayes scrawled in red marker, "Witnesses start from scratch." First up was the gas station where David and Emily were last seen on camera at 11:30 p.m. The night manager, Janice Howard, was still working there, now in her early 50s. When Rachel and her partner arrived, Janice was nervous, but remembered clearly. That night, "I didn't just see them buy coffee," she said. David walked outside first, then came back, arguing with someone by the door. Rachel's pen froze. This detail wasn't in the 2012 report. "Can you describe the man?" she asked. Janice closed her eyes. He was tall, maybe 40, longish brown hair, light-colored shirt. He slapped the glass door with his hand, angry. David looked tense. Emily looked scared. Rachel asked why this hadn't come up before. "They only asked me what they bought," Janice said. "I mentioned the guy." Nobody followed up. This time, Rachel recorded everything, audio, notes, and Janice's signed statement. The next piece of the puzzle was Harold Benson, a retired trucker who'd reported seeing the Whitakers' Malibu pulled over along I-55 with the hood up, one of the last known sightings before they vanished. Harold now lived quietly outside Meridian. When Rachel knocked on his door, he didn't hesitate. "I've waited 10 years for this," he said. He recounted that night clearly. Northbound. A silver Malibu on the shoulder, hood open. But that wasn't what caught his attention. A white pickup truck was parked behind it. No lights on. Just sitting there, watching. Harold's voice turned serious. "I saw a man standing near the car. Tall, broad shoulders. He was talking to someone inside." Rachel leaned forward. "Can you describe him?" Harold nodded. "Brown hair, sturdy build, wearing a light-colored shirt. I was just passing by, but that image, it stuck with me." Rachel and Sheriff Hayes exchanged a glance. Two witnesses, Janice and Harold, had now described the same man. Different locations. Same physical build. Same shirt. Same uneasy feeling. They turned to the old files and started digging. One name surfaced, Mark Ellison. Mark Ellison was no stranger. He'd been David Whitaker's friend back in high school. Occasionally, they worked small construction jobs together, but according to the family, Things turned sour years before the disappearance. Mark was reckless with money and David, always honest, cut ties. David's brother remembered him saying once, "I'm done with Mark. Never again." Rachel pulled an old photo of Ellison from the file. She showed it to Janice and Harold, separately. Janice looked at it and gasped. "Yes, that's him." "That's the man I saw near the gas station." Harold didn't hesitate either. "That's the guy I saw at the reservoir. I remember that face." Now, the witness accounts weren't just loose threads. They were forming a shape. A tall man. Light shirt? Brown hair. Possibly injured. Possibly driven by money. The pieces began to point in one direction. Mark Ellison. With a mounting list of clues, blood not matching the victims, a large shoe print, a missing wallet, and now 2 witness IDs. Sheriff Hayes called an urgent meeting. He stood before the team. "This isn't a mystery anymore," he said. "It's a manhunt. We're locking in on Ellison," Rachel added, "but it's not enough. We need something irrefutable. The blood in that car, if it's his, we've got him." From that moment, the investigation entered a new phase. Mark Ellison's name wasn't buried in old paperwork anymore. It was front and center, highlighted in red ink and circled in urgency. In Jackson, people started whispering, "Was the killer among us this whole time?" The team shifted focus. They dug into Ellison's background. Turns out he ran a small auto garage in Laurel, just an hour south of Jackson. But the garage was barely surviving. Lawsuits, tax fines, service complaints. The finances told the story. Mark was drowning in debt. His credit history showed missed loan payments, personal debts, and even a pending lawsuit from a client accusing him of stealing repair funds. Tens of thousands owed. No savings. Just pressure.dmv records confirmed something else. Mark had owned a white 2010 Ford F-150 pickup, registered in his name. That same truck had been seen at the reservoir the night David and Emily vanished. Local newspaper photos from 2011 even showed Ellison standing next to it at a community event. He sold it in 2015, but the record trail remained, the C. Team began rebuilding Ellison's timeline for the night of July 14, 2012, garage. Logs showed he clocked out around 6 p.m. friends. At a local bar said he had a few beers and left at 10 p.m. After that, nothing, no receipts. No camera footage, no witnesses, just a blank gap. Ellison claimed back then that he went home and fell asleep. Alone. Rachel circled it in red. 10 p.m. to midnight, the critical window. The same window when David and Emily disappeared. He had no alibi, and he had motive. Then came something big. 2 days after the Whitakers vanished, Ellison deposited $35,000 cash into his account. A figure far above what his garage could produce. When questioned, Ellison mumbled about an old debt someone repaid, but offered no name, no paperwork. The robbery theory, David's missing wallet, suddenly felt less like theory, more like fact. Digging deeper, Rachel's team uncovered an old fuel purchase from a gas station on Route 25, 10:45 p.m., July 14, 2012. The receipt matched Mark Ellison's credit card. That gas station was right by the entrance to the reservoir. The puzzle was almost complete. Eyewitness descriptions. History with the victim, financial collapse. Sudden cash, matching truck, fuel receipt placing him at the scene in the sheriff's office. Rachel and Hayes stared at the whiteboard. Ellison's name in the middle. Around it, witness photos, tire tracks, timeline notes, and the fuel receipt pinned with red string. "It's all there," Rachel said. "Motive, opportunity, presence, and now possibly DNA." But Hayes wasn't ready to move. "We need that last piece," he said. "Blood, fingerprint, or trace DNA, something that ties him to that car beyond a doubt." Rachel nodded. "We have one shot. If that foreign blood matches Ellison, we end this." The team mobilized, focused. Every step now led to Ellison. He wasn't just a friend from the past. He was now the prime suspect in one of Mississippi's most haunting double homicides. And oddly, the key might come from something everyone once ignored. A broken Nokia phone. The SIM card, fragile but intact, had already been sent to the state's digital forensics lab. Now, experts worked around the clock using advanced data recovery software to dig through every trace. One number, one message, One call log could tip the scales and finally reveal what really happened on that summer night. For days, the lab's computers worked non-stop, decoding line after line of hex code from the old SIM card. Then finally, something. A message surfaced, time-stamped 11:42 p.m., July 14, 2012. Sender, Emily Whitaker. Message: someone is following us. The room fell silent. Rachel read the words out loud, her voice tightening with emotion. Each syllable echoed like a whisper from the grave. This was proof, not just of presence, but of fear. Emily knew they were being followed. It shattered any remaining doubt. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was pursuit, stalking, a deadly end to something far more sinister. Rachel immediately ordered a full review of all footage taken near the reservoir that night, even those clips previously marked unusable. Deep in the archives, technicians found a grainy clip from a private warehouse camera. Just over a mile from the reservoir entrance, rain blurred most of the view. But at exactly 11:40 p.m., a white pickup passed through the frame, 2 minutes before Emily's message. Rachel stood and pointed at the monitor. This isn't coincidence. That truck shows up just as Emily types that. Sheriff Hayes nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. We're close. Real close. The next blow came from cell tower data. With a court order, the tech team pulled Mark Ellison's archived records. His phone pinged a tower near the reservoir between 11:40 and 11:50 p.m., the same time frame. Now, 3 puzzle pieces connected, Emily's final text. At a camera showing a white truck, a cell tower data placing Ellison in the area. Rachel recorded the findings in her report. Mark Ellison had motive, means, and was physically present at the crime scene. The digital trail confirms it. In the next strategy meeting, voices clashed. We've got 2 witnesses, a boot print, foreign blood, and now phone data, one investigator said. What more do we need? DNA, another replied. That's the lock. Hayes spoke last. Emily gave us her voice, her message. We owe her a full answer. Let's tie this up right. The news broke quickly. Jackson's front pages ran the headline, "Someone is following us. Emily Whitaker's last words." The town was shaken. Candlelight vigils formed again by the reservoir. People whispered the phrase like a vow. They wanted closure. They wanted justice, and for the investigators, the path ahead was clear. Ellison wasn't just a lead. He was now the center of the case. They had motive, opportunity, presence, evidence. All that remained was DNA. Late one night, Rachel stood alone in the office. She looked at the printout of Emily's final message, tacked to the corkboard. Her voice low, almost a whisper, Emily told us. Now we finish it. With that, the case entered its most intense phase yet, the final pursuit of Mark Ellison. Ellison blinked. His face tensed. Nothing, just a guess, he said quickly. When cars crash into lakes, hoods pop. That's normal. But the room knew that detail, the hood being up, was never released publicly. Only the divers and lead investigators knew it. Rachel leaned in, voice low but clear. You knew the hood was up, she said, because you saw it. You were there. You touched that car before it went into the water. Ellison didn't answer. Sweat formed across his forehead. He tried to grin, to deflect, but his face betrayed him. You've got nothing, he muttered. A drop of blood. A blurry photo. A pickup truck like 1,000 others. That's not proof. Then he folded his arms and went cold. Silent again. But the investigators didn't need more. Between the DNA and the slip about the hood, Ellison had already sealed his fate. Sheriff Hayes, watching from behind the one-way mirror, clenched his fist. That's it, he whispered. Right after the second interrogation, Rachel and Hayes compiled a final report and sent it directly to the Hinds County Prosecutor's Office. They outlined the full chain of evidence. Security footage of the white pickup. Cell tower data placing Ellison at the reservoir. Emily's final message, someone is following us. Eyewitnesses, and most damning, the DNA match from the Malibu. Plus, Ellison's verbal slip, the one piece only someone at the crime scene could know. The case landed on the desk of veteran prosecutor Harriet Collins. She reviewed every file, every transcript, every timestamp. In a closed meeting, she declared, "This is rock solid. We have what we need for an arrest." Collins prepared the 300-plus page filing for federal court in Jackson. In court, she presented it all: the white pickup footage, the cell pings, Emily's haunting final message. She paused on the DNA slide and said, "One drop of blood waited 12 years to speak." And now it speaks against Mark Ellison. The judge sat silently, absorbing each page. Then, after nearly 2 hours, he picked up his pen, he signed the arrest. Warrant Mark Ellison would now face charges for 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of staging. A crime scene. The weight of 12 years finally tipped. Justice was in motion. The arrest plan launched instantly. Since his last interrogation, Ellison had been moving constantly between Laurel, Jackson, and Vicksburg, trying to stay out of view. He'd even opened a small garage under a fake name, but surveillance never broke. By late April 2024, signs showed he was preparing to flee. The task force acted. On April 18th, just before sunrise, a quiet Vicksburg street was sealed off. 7 police cruisers blocked both ends. A SWAT team closed in. Inside the garage, Ellison looked up at the flashing lights. Shouts followed. "Mark Ellison, you are under arrest for the murders of David and Emily Whitaker." He made a weak move toward the back door, but was tackled before his hand touched the handle. Handcuffs locked around his wrists. Neighbors gathered. Some filmed. By noon, photos of Ellison being led to a squad car were everywhere online. The man long suspected had finally been caught. Back at HQ, Hayes took the confirmation call. He didn't say much, just stared at the photo of David and Emily still pinned to the caseboard. "We did it," he whispered. Rachel Moore stepped into the room, exhausted but with quiet fire in her eyes. "Now," she said, "it's the court's turn." At last, the Whitaker family saw justice begin to move. That evening, the story broke on every network. 2012 cold case solved. Suspect Mark Ellison arrested in Vicksburg. In Jackson, church candles flickered to life. Locals gathered quietly, whispering prayers for David and Emily Whitaker. The arrest wasn't just legal. It was a long-awaited promise kept after 12 years of silence, doubt, and pain. Mark Ellison's trial opened September 12, 2024, at the Hinds County Courthouse. By sunrise, hundreds crowded the courthouse steps, holding candles and photos of the young couple. For them, it wasn't just a trial. It was reckoning. It was closure. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with breathless anticipation. Ellison wore a gray suit. His hair had thinned and silvered, but his eyes still held that same arrogant defiance. Mississippi's prosecutor, Harriet Collins, stood tall. "We're not just reopening a case," she declared. "We're unburying justice. David and Emily Whitaker were brutally murdered, and the killer staged it to look like an accident. But the evidence tells the real story, and it leads to that man." She began with the blood. 1 drop, genetically proven to be Ellison's. It had soaked into the Malibu's door. "Sealed in the crime lab's report. Science doesn't lie," Collins said. "That stain places him inside the car. Next?" She pulled up a cell tower map. His phone pinged near the reservoir from 11:40 to 11:50 p.m. The same moment Emily sent her last message. "Someone is following us." He wasn't home. He was there. With them. She clicked play. The grainy security footage flickered on screen. An unmistakable white Ford F-150 driving toward the lake. "That's Ellison's truck," she said. No mistake. Then she read Emily's final message aloud. The courtroom fell completely silent. Those 4 words hit like thunder. "Someone is following us." "This is a dying declaration," she told the jury. Emily told us what happened. And Mark Ellison was that someone. Then came motive. $35,000, Collins said. Deposited the day after their deaths. His garage was failing. No explanation, no receipts, just cash. And David's wallet? Found empty. The defense tried to poke holes. Frank Delaney, Ellison's attorney, claimed the DNA came from a past repair. The camera footage was too blurry. And the money was a debt repayment, but Collins hit back fast. If it's repair blood, why is it on the driver's door, where the victims were attacked? If the truck isn't his, why does the cell tower prove he was there? If the money's innocent, where's the paper trail? Then came the witnesses. First, Janice Howard, a gas station clerk in 2012. I remember that night, she said, voice shaking. David argued with a big man in a light-colored shirt. I'll never forget his eyes, she pointed at Ellison. That's him. Then Harold Benson, a trucker who'd driven past the scene. I saw the Malibu roadside, he said. Hood was up. White pickup parked behind it. A tall man standing there. That man, he nodded at Ellison, was the one I saw. Delaney pushed back. Are you sure after 12 years? Harold didn't flinch. Some faces stick in your brain. This one did. Day after day, more testimony stacked up. Sonar experts, divers, forensic analysts, the DRU recovery team. Together, they built a timeline that led straight to Ellison. The final image was crystal clear. Ellison followed David and Emily. He confronted them. He struck them. Then he shoved the Malibu into the water and made it look like an accident, before depositing the stolen money. In closing, Collins stood tall. David and Emily can't speak. But DNA, data, video, witness voices, and Emily's own final words speak for them. And every single one points to Mark Ellison. The jury left to deliberate. 2 hours passed. When they returned, the foreperson stood. We find the defendant, Mark Ellison, guilty of the first-degree murder of David and Emily Whitaker. Gasps filled the room. Then tears. The Whitaker family embraced, sobbing, while outside church bells rang across Jackson. Crowds filled the streets, cheering, weeping. Justice had finally arrived. Ellison didn't speak. His face had drained of color. He was cuffed without resistance and led away. The fire in his eyes? Gone 12 years. Cold silence, finally broken. On October 18, 2024, the courtroom was packed once more. The judge took his seat and reviewed the evidence aloud. DNA, phone records, financial data, every word from every witness, and the jury's verdict. This court, he said, sentences Mark Ellison to life imprisonment without parole for the murders of David and Emily Whitaker. Applause broke out. Mixed with sobs, Ellison stood motionless. Officers flanked him, metal cuffs clicking tight. This time, no fight remained. As he was escorted out, the courtroom sat still, watching the shadow of a ghost finally removed. Then came the family. Anna Whitaker, now 20, trembling but composed, stood at the witness podium. 12 years ago, she began, voice shaking. We were just kids. Every night we went to bed asking where our parents were. Now we know. They're never coming back. But the truth came, and truth matters. Grace, her younger sister, whispered through tears, Mom and Dad can rest now. We'll live the rest of our lives for them. The courtroom wept. For Jackson, the case had become more than a crime. It became a legend, a haunting, a reminder. National news outlets called it the cold case of the decade. TV screens replayed the journey. The 2012 disappearance. Years of false starts, the Malibu pulled from the reservoir, and the DNA that finally shattered the lie. At the water's edge, a memorial plaque was placed in memory of David and Emily Whitaker. Justice after 12 years. At the final press conference, Sheriff Hayes, now nearing retirement, stood before the cameras. This isn't just a police victory, he said. This is a win for Jackson, for the Whitaker family, for truth. Let it be known, no killer stays hidden, and no secret stays buried forever. That night, Jackson was quiet. At the Ross Barnett Reservoir, moonlight skimmed across still waters. The same waters that had swallowed the Malibu now shimmered calm, holding no visible trace of the past. But those who remembered would always see. That water still whispered, because truth, though buried, always rises. This chapter closed not just a case, but a wound. And the Whitaker case became more than justice delayed. It became a mirror. It reflected the fragile balance of modern life, the power of technology, the persistence of community, and the need for relentless pursuit of truth. Emily's final words, "Someone is following us," reminded everyone how quickly safety can vanish, and how critical data, DNA, and courage are in finding justice. Without sonar scans, DNA sequencing and cell tower triangulation, this case would have remained just another mystery. Without a family's refusal to give up, justice wouldn't have knocked. And Ellison's sudden $35,000 windfall reminded the nation. Financial greed remains a powerful motivator. Every suspicious deposit could be a clue. But the greatest lesson came from the people, the Whitaker family. The searchers, the residents who lit candles year after year, they didn't quit. In a world moving too fast to care, their persistence showed us something real. Justice exists only when communities stand together. So stay alert. Use what you have. Speak when silence tempts you, because even the darkest, truth will surface, and secrets don't stay hidden forever. Thank you for joining us on this long journey to uncover the truth behind Mississippi's 12-year cold case. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. Stay with us. We'll keep chasing the truth, because someone always knows.